Well, I don't know if you noticed that there is this ladder in your way. You probably thought somebody forgot to take it down, but they didn't. So, okay, pray I'm safe up here, all right? So, it was a few weeks ago when we were back in chapter 2 of the book of Ecclesiastes that we asked this question, is work pointless? And we said, are we just here, kind of building glorified sandcastles? You go to work every day, you spend your life, and then, in the course of time, it's gone. So is this just a glorified sandcastle building thing we do in life? Well, today in chapter 4, we come to something that's similar, it's related, there's overlap, but it's not identical. And so we're going to talk about climbing the ladder of success, of success, right? So, what was it in high school? Did you have this in high school? And people would, at the end of the year, you'd have the most likely to, or the best looking, most gullible, most likely to succeed. They probably don't do that anymore because that's like, you're going to make people feel bad. That's not politically correct, right? You can't do that. But it was kind of taken for granted, I think, that everybody understood what that meant. That, I guess, success was financial success, material success. It was, who's going to make the most money, have the nicest house, etc., etc. So we're going to talk about climbing the ladder, and in the passage, there's kind of two legs to this ladder of success as the world defines it. And so one is the ladder of envy, and we might call it keeping up with the Joneses, this material pursuits, money and wealth and so on. And the other one is ambition, or I don't know if you can read that at that weird angle, call it legacy or personal achievement or personal advancement or whatever. And this is the ladder that a lot of people climb in life. This is the goal, the ambition of life. This is what you do in life. So if you'll find Ecclesiastes chapter 4, if you haven't already, that'll give me a second to get off this ladder safely. By the way, this is the ladder that I was on when I tore ligaments in my knee a few years ago. I was scrounging barn boards out here off of Geckler Lane, and I leaned the ladder up. I was getting boards off the rafters, these old, thick 2x, and I leaned my ladder up on the collar ties, and I had a chainsaw, and I did a stupid human trick. I'm just going to town, and I cut the board, the collar tie that my ladder's leaning against, and so the top of the ladder starts like this, down I'm going, and, you got 2 seconds to figure out what you're going to do, but it feels like 5 minutes in slow motion, So I pitched the chainsaw. I had enough piece, to do that, but my legs slipped between the rungs like this as the ladder came down, tore my LCL and PCL in this knee. So I hope you feel bad for me. Okay. Ecclesiastes 4, and I'm going to take my sweet time getting down. Climbing the ladder. Verse 4 is where we'll pick up. So I said the first leg is what? Envy. Verse 4. Then I saw that all toil and all skill in work come from man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and striving after wind. So they're, keeping up with the Joneses. There are various, you Google that, stories of where that phrase came from. Is it just, Jones is a super common last name, and so it's just, use the word Jones or Johnson or whatever common name in there. There's a couple of more interesting ones. One is that some say it goes back to this lady named Elizabeth Jones, who lived in New York. You've heard of her, David? So she builds this house that came to be called Windcliff Castle on the banks of the Hudson River in New York. And it's this, big fancy thing. and she hosts these lavish balls. And so these big parties, elaborate, ornate parties and stuff. And so, you know, you got to keep up with the Joneses. You know, Elizabeth has a lot of money. Other people say, no, there's these people in Wilmington, North Carolina. Pembroke and Sarah Jones were their names. And these are two of their homes, two of their many homes. They had a home in New York. They had a home in, where? Newport, Rhode Island. They had several homes in North Carolina. One of their annual budget line items as a family is for entertainment, and it's the equivalent of $6.8 million today. So they're spending the equivalent of what would today be $7 million per year just to entertain people. Yeah. So it could come from them. Some people say the phrase comes from this comic strip that went by that title, Keeping Up with the Joneses, that ran like 1910s, 20s, 30s. And, you know, the whole idea of the funny comic strip is this family, I think they're called the McGinnises or something, does it say up there? Aloysius and Clarice McGinnis and their daughter Julie are desperately trying to match the affluent lifestyle of their neighbors, the Joneses. And so, you know, they get these ridiculous hats and they're always trying to keep up with. And that may have been drawn from the people in North Carolina, Pembroke and Sarah. Maybe that's where he got the inspiration. Whatever the origination of the phrase, we know what it means, right? To keep up with the Joneses. And this is not a uniquely American thing. Although, when I think American dream, I think of a number of things. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, but also prosperity, right? I think embedded in the American dream is material prosperity or well-being. Would you agree with that? That's often part of it. This is not just American, though. Verse 4, the preacher here, this is Israel, thousands of years ago, and he says, man, there's people working really hard, toil and skill in work, and it's coming from an envy of their neighbor. They're trying to keep up with the Joneses even in Israel thousands of years ago. So Heidi's mom turned us on to this show called Castle Impossible. Has anybody watched this show? One of these home makeover innovation shows? Anybody seen this one? It's pretty interesting because the home they're renovating is that. So this young couple from California, they don't have kids yet. She inherits this French chateau from her grandfather. And she would spend the summers over there. She was close to her grandpa. He dies. He gives this to her. 133 acres. It's got the moat around it, trees and buildings everywhere. Super cool place, you know. But the inheritance tax on it was $1 million right off the top from the French government. So they're hosting weddings there to pay the bills, and then they're trying to renovate this thing room by room slowly over the years. You imagine the scale of that kind of project? Well, in the course of the show, the young lady who inherited the chateau says several times, there's 50,000 chateaus like this still in France. 50,000 of these old castles, these manors, and they're these big wedding venues now. So, you know, over the centuries, 50,000 places that are like this, akin to this. So this keeping up with the Joneses. Have you ever fallen prey to this temptation? You ever fallen into this? No? I have. You know our place where we live, we have a cute little house, you know, and it's nice. We live by a creek. God's blessed us. It's really a nice place to spend our days. It's a nice tent to dwell in while we're here. But I still find myself looking over the fence, so to speak, sometimes. Like we're kind of hemmed in. We don't have a lot of room. Man, it'd be nice to have some acreage. I'd like to, you know, I'd love to go out the back door and shoot my bow, and the boys could hop on the four-wheelers and drive around. And I'd love to have a shop instead of a one-car garage where I could do some projects in. Man, it'd be nice to have what so-and-so has. You ever do that? More acreage for my wife's flowers. Now, some of that, as I think about my heart over the years, is I think there's a legitimate, like, the lifestyle in the country, there's something about that. There's some cool opportunities. But there's also a keeping up with the Joneses thing that works its way in there for me. So the Bible is full of a lot of warnings about the dangers of material pursuits, right? Of making money the big thing. Here's one of many. 1 Timothy 6, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith. Spiritual ruin going after money, and have pierced themselves with many griefs. So he says, I look around and I see, man, there's this thing going on. I see it in people in my day, envy of their neighbor, keeping up with the Joneses. But he doesn't want us to get the wrong idea that he's against hard work. He's not calling for the opposite extreme, kind of do nothing. So in verse 5, look what he says. He says, the fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. This guy's not eating his own flesh exactly, but the couch potato, you don't work, eventually you're going to be impoverished is the idea. Now, so he, on the one hand, he warns us against, go, I got to make more, got to have more, got to get more stuff, working harder so I can have more stuff. That's one extreme. On the other hand, he's like, I don't want you doing this either. That's not what it's about. The proverbial 30-year-old guy that lives in mom and dad's basement and plays video games all day. We don't want that either. So the Bible, we know, commends hard work. Proverbs 24, I went past the field of the sluggard, past the vineyard of someone who has no sense. Thorns had come up everywhere. The ground was covered with weeds. The stone wall was in ruins. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. A lot of good has been accomplished in America as a result of the Judeo-Christian work ethic, right? That's a big reason for a lot of the good we experience. So here's the balance he's calling for. Verse 6. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and striving after wind. So the teeter-totter. On one end is the sluggard who does nothing, just the lazy person. On the other end, he's saying, hey, we don't want to be just go, because we want more stuff all the time, keeping up with the Joneses. And somewhere in the middle, in this tension, there is the hard work that the Bible commends with contentment before God, with what he's given in and through that. What do they say? A bird in hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? Better is a handful of quietness, content with what God's given, than 2 hands full of toil and striving after wind. So, I got a little anecdote for you. And this one's for you, my sweet wife. You'll see why, okay? This is from a guy who's a pastor, and he's looking back on when he was in school and one of his professors in school. He says, Professor Jerem Bars tried to help us. He sought to teach us to view our lives with God and the lives of those we serve as human beings. We're all human. In his living room with tea, Hunter Bears, tea. I once asked Jerem why he hadn't written more books over the years. He had taught us, he'd traveled the world, and continued to give so much of himself for others. I told him how so many of us long to hear more from him and want to learn more. Pausing and shrugging his shoulders, he smiled broadly and set his teacup on his plate. What he said in response put ministry ambition and the doctrine of creation into perspective. I'd like to write more, he said, but I really enjoy my garden. Better, he says, is a handful of quietness than 2 handfuls of striving after the wind, never content, always got to do more, always got to get more. So after all, what will keeping up with the Joneses get us at the end of the day? This is Windcliff Castle. There's the Hudson River. Today, this is what it looks like. Like a creepy old haunted house now. And that was a top-of-the-line mansion in the 1850s and 60s. And there it crumbles. So one leg of the ladder climb is what? Envy. The other we might call ambition, advancement, personal achievement. So he goes on to tell this interesting story, and I'm going to hop over verses 7 through 12, where Pastor Wayne, hopefully, will preach on next week, if he's well enough. But on to verse 13 to the end of the chapter. He tells this interesting story that's a little bit confusing and maybe hard to follow. So see if you can track with this as you look in your Bible. Verse 13, better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king, who no longer knew how to take advice. For he went from prison to the throne, though in his own kingdom he had been born poor. I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, of all whom he led. Yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and striving after wind. So are you tracking with what he's saying there? Are you confused? Like, what's the backstory? What exactly is going on there? If you're confused, don't feel bad. The smart guys, the Bible scholars, are not totally sure of like what this exact scenario. But it boils down to this. You either got 2 kings or you got 3 kings. And if you got 2 kings, you got 2 possible scenarios with 2 kings. Got that so far? Okay. So either it could be that the poor youth is now the old king. So the old unwise king once was the poor youth, and he's just gotten old, and now he doesn't take advice anymore. And then in verse 15, there's going to be somebody else that arises to replace him. Or it could be that the first king is the old king, and the one who rises to replace him is this poor youth who ascends out of prison. And he's the same one in verse 15. Or if you got 3 kings, you got the old king, the poor youth who replaces the old king, and then you got the guy after that. You got all that? Regardless of how we understand the details, what's the point he's trying to get at? What's he saying? Well, that too. But there's going to be somebody else. You're replaceable. Nobody's irreplaceable. Nobody's indispensable. King after king after king. That one's going to go. Somebody's going to replace him. You're going to go. Somebody's going to replace you. And on and on and on it will go. So here you've got a guy, the king, who's made it where? He's made it to the top rung. The highest position in society. The pinnacle. He has the power, maybe even the popularity. He has the following. He has the people. He's got Instagram followers in the millions. He's got subscribers on YouTube in the trillions, whatever. He's at the top of the ladder. He's made the climb. He's ascended to the top. And what's he get at the end of it? He gets replaced. Verse 16. says, though there is no end to the people who follow him, you got all these people, yet those who come later won't rejoice in him. He'll be forgotten. Oh, remember King so-and-so a couple generations later? Who? Not really. I mean, I've heard his name, but yeah, no, I don't really remember him at all. Over the years, we've watched some of these talent shows. America's Got Talent, The Voice. They interview the contestants. Hey, what advice would you have for the people watching from home? Or your kids couldn't make it, they're at home watching. What do you want to say to them? And what is the answer? The one I've most often heard. What do the people say? That's it, Linda. I just want to let everybody know this is what you need to do. You need to follow your dreams. Don't ever give up on your dream. Never let it go. Don't let anybody tell you no. Follow your dreams and keep going and never give up. Almost invariably. It's like the standard accepted answer. I hear that over and over, like, that's the thing to say. That's how you should think about it. That's what life is about, is you following your dream. That's why you're here, to achieve your dreams. That's why God put you on this earth. What do you think of that? Now, is it wrong to have dreams? You can't be a person and not have some aspirations, some dreams, some goals, some things. We get up every day, even if you don't have one of these people that writes down your goals for the day. You get up and you have an idea of something that you want to achieve that day. We need to get this done. I'd like to do that. I'd like to make sure that gets accomplished. We operate like this every day as people, right? The problem is what? When we make that the ultimate. Like it becomes an idol. It becomes, this is what I'm all about. This is the most important thing, and it's about me and my dream. Above and beyond everything else. So, one of our favorite movies is McFarland, USA. Somebody like this movie? Good movie. Really good movie. Based on a true story. So, Jim White is the coach's name. He and his family in the movie, I mean, it's based on true stories, so they don't follow it perfectly, but they moved to McFarland, California team. They didn't have one. And at first they don't have shoes and they don't have anything, but they're these tough kids, they're hard-nosed, they're tough, and they're good runners, and they start having success. So it's the rags to riches thing. Well, he gets noticed. The coaches at other schools are like, man, that guy's doing a heck of a job. Look, he took that from nothing to something. Wow. And so he gets a job offer from Palo Alto High School. I don't know if it's still a rich area, but Stanford University. So, hey, Coach White, we'd like to hire you at Palo Alto. More money, more equipment, more resources. It's a bigger, better job. And so he's weighing this. You guys know I'm a sports guy. Anybody here is sports people? What do the coaches do in college and the pros? Their families are almost always constantly on the move. You're there 4, 5, 6 years. Each job is just another step to the bigger job, to the bigger budget, to the better job. You're climbing the rung of your career, ascending the ladder. So he's weighing this offer. Man, Palo Alto, more money, better neighborhood for my family, nicer house. And he's kind of keeping it. He goes for an interview and he's kind of keeping it on the down low. He's kind of keeping it under wraps. He doesn't want the people back in McFarland to know he might jump ship on them. Well, one of the kids gets wind of it, one of his runners. And there's this, and he's not happy about it. And he's like, there's this scene where they have this conversation. And the kid at one point says something like, they call him White because his name's Jim White. They call him Blanco. White, I get it. It's America. You go bigger. That's what you do. It's America. You go bigger. I get it. It's a better gig for you. So whether it is the corporate world, climbing the corporate ladder, the sports world, pastors can do this too. Did you know that? Climb the ministry profession ladder. Bigger church, bigger budget, more money, more people. So here's another little story from this book. If you'll let me read this one to you. So he tells this story about this guy he knows named Richard. Richard was fresh out of graduate school and contemplating his first pastorate. So young kid out of graduate school, first church. The rural farming community of Cana, Illinois. Rural community, farm people. Was one of his ministry options. He hesitates, Richard. He's like, I don't know if I want that or not. I'm looking for a significant ministry, he says to his dad. Cana's nice, but is it significant? Significant, his dad says. You've been preparing for this for more than 10 years. You've piled up more schooling after high school than most people have in their whole life. These people are saying, come, we've been waiting for you. You can be our pastor, which is what you said you wanted all along. And now it has to be significant? Isn't ministry significant? I thought it was. All of it, everywhere. His dad says to him. And he says, yeah, of course. I guess I want to have an impact on people's lives. There are people in Cana, Richard, his dad says, in case you hadn't noticed. And Richard says back to him, you don't understand what I want. I am weighing this offer, but it has to be right for me. It's not an offer, his dad interrupted. It's a call. So, hey, if there's not, it's got to be bigger and better. You got to ascend the ladder. So he's reached the pinnacle. Verse 16, there's no end, as I said, and yet he's forgotten. And he says, surely this also is vanity and striving after wind. Now, is all ambition bad? No, it is not. 1 Timothy 3, if anyone aspires to the office of overseer, this is to be an elder in a church, a spiritual overseer or shepherd, he desires a noble task. So it's not the office, it's not about a position, this is a good work. And God's put it in my heart to want to do it. That is a noble aspiration when it's rightly motivated, a noble ambition, if you will. Dan Davenport, one of his favorite verses, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, contented, mind your own business, and work with your hands. Sounds a lot like verse 6, right? Better is a handful of quietness than 2 handfuls and striving after wind. Paul says to Timothy, you've followed my teaching, my conduct, my aim in life. So if I can pull the teeter-totter diagram out one more time, similar to what we said before, you got this tension and this balance. On the one side is the no drive, video games in the basement, if I can, not that all video games are bad. I play video games once in a while, but you know what I mean. That's all you do, and you're just mooching off people, and you're not doing anything. And then you've got the me-centered ambition. Follow your dreams. It's about you and your dream above all else, and don't ever stop till you get it. And in the middle, there is a God-centered, there's a holy sort of ambition to work and live for the glory of God. So, climbing the ladder of personal success. Whether it's envy, whether it's out of ambition, whether it's whatever else, he says, it goes nowhere. There really isn't a ladder. There really is no such thing. eternally, it's striving after wind. I got to thinking, where would we be if that's what Jesus lived for? If Jesus' aim was material gain and personal achievement for his own dreams and his own attainment and his own advancement, where would we be? You don't come to this earth, the Son of God, born in a Bethlehem barn, living in Nazareth, a despised town, in a poor family. You don't do that if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses. He's the king of the universe, and that's how he lives. You don't go to the cross and die. You don't call fishermen and tax collectors and walk the dusty streets homeless if you're about your personal advancement and your personal ambitions. You don't die on a cross if you're all about my personal achievement, right? If Jesus did that, we'd be done. Thank God that that's not what Jesus was about. Philippians 2. Let me end with this. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. What a Savior. Aren't we glad he didn't climb the worldly ladder of success?